Some countries treat racism like a scandal, a public stain, a moment to apologize, trend, and move on. Brazil treats it like a crime, not a metaphor, not a misunderstanding, not just words, a crime with prison on the table. And when you understand that, you start to see the real question hiding beneath every debate about racism in America. Does a society actually oppose racism? Or does it just dislike the optics because optics are cheap? Consequences cost. In Brazil's constitution, the practice of racism is framed as a serious offense. And Brazilian law criminalizes racist acts and discrimination. Then in 2023, the country tightened the grip even more. Racial insult aimed at a person, the kind of everyday slur people try to laugh off, was treated as a form of racism under the law. That shift matters because most racism doesn't show up wearing a hood. It shows up wearing confidence. It shows up in crowds. It shows up in a joke. It shows up when someone thinks nobody with power is listening. And Brazil decided that power should listen now, before anyone gets comfortable. Let us say the quiet part out loud. Brazil is not a utopia. It has deep racial inequality, colorism, and a long history of pretending racism doesn't exist while it quietly shapes everything. So this isn't a fairy tale about a perfect country. This is a story about a line in the sand. A line that says you can think whatever you want, but if you turn race into a weapon, if you turn someone's humanity into a punchline or a target, you're not just being controversial. You're committing an offense that the state can punish. That's a different type of society. And it gets real when you put a real person under it. In 2025, Brazilian comedian Leo Lins was sentenced to years in prison for a performance. The court ruled crossed into discriminatory content against multiple groups, including Black and Indigenous people. Whether you agree with that sentence or not, the point is unavoidable. Brazil treated the act as something more than entertainment. The judge treated it as harm with consequences. And that brings us to the part America struggles to say without choking. In the United States, racism is often handled like a weather system. We measure it. We argue about whether it's really raining. We blame the people who got wet. Then we act surprised when the storm comes back. Think about it. How many racist incidents in America end with an apology and a job loss, maybe? If the employer thinks the backlash will hurt profits. How many end with nothing at all? Because the footage wasn't clear, the victim wasn't believed, the report couldn't be verified, the community didn't want conflict, the system protected its own. How many times is the punishment not law, but the internet? And what is the internet? A bonfire. It burns hot, it burns fast, it burns sideways, it turns justice into entertainment and leaves behind ash, not accountability. So here's the harsh truth. America does not have a consistent racism response system for everyday life. It has a roulette wheel. That inconsistency is the oxygen. Because if the consequence is random, the behavior becomes a gamble. And for people who think the system will protect them, it's a gamble they're willing to take. Now imagine a different template. Not Brazil is perfect, not copy Brazil, a template. A country where the message is simple. If you do racial harm in public, the state does not outsource the response to vibes. It responds. Not because it's woke, not because it's sensitive, because it's protecting the basic conditions of human dignity in public life. So what would that look like here? First, it would mean America stops pretending racism is only real when it's dramatic. Because racism isn't only a burning cross. It's the hiring decision. It's the school discipline. It's the landlord. It's the traffic stop. It's the joke. It's the threat hiding inside the laugh. Second, it would mean consequences aren't only social. Social consequences are shaky. They depend on popularity, on algorithms, on who the public sympathizes with. Legal consequences are supposed to depend on standards, evidence, procedure. The rule that says your rights end where harm begins. Third, it would mean we stop calling harm free speech, when what we really mean is freedom from consequence. Freedom of speech is the right to speak. It is not a magical shield that turns cruelty into innocence. And here is where the conversation usually collapses. Someone says, "So you want to arrest everyone for saying something racist?" No, the point isn't to police thoughts, it's about police conduct. The point is not to criminalize every ignorant sentence. The point is to draw a line at racial degradation and discrimination that functions as intimidation, exclusion, and public harm. Because when you let racial harm slide as just words, you're not defending freedom, you're defending permission. And permission is what turns bias into culture. Now ask yourself a question that doesn't let anyone hide behind slogans. What do we actually do with racism in America? Do we confront it, or do we debate it until it becomes background noise? Because there's a difference between a country that's against racism in theory and a country that makes racism expensive in practice. Expensive to your reputation, sure, but also expensive to your wallet. Expensive to your freedom if you decide to weaponize race against another human being in ways the law can define and prove. And here's the final question, the one that hits like a cold coin in your palm. If a society loudly condemns racism but rarely punishes it consistently, what is it really protecting? The victims, or the comfort of everyone who benefits from calling it complicated? Because history shows this. Racism doesn't survive because it's convincing. It survives because it's convenient. So the real relationship goal for a nation isn't love, it's integrity. Say what you mean what you say. And if you truly believe racism is wrong, stop treating the response like a debate club. Treat it like a line. Treat it like law. Treat it like something you refuse to normalize, no matter how familiar it has become.